Now to a developing story. The fight over restoring felons' voting rights is really heating up.
Kansas state lawmakers are now trying to put limits on felons who want their voting rights restored. The House is aiming to clear up Amendment 4, which voters approved 2-1 last November. The amendment calling for the rights to be restored once all of their sentence, including parole or probation, is finished. A new proposal, however, requires felons to pay off court costs, fees, and fines before getting their voting rights back. That measure trying to create a clear way to determine who is and who is not eligible to vote.
What we want to avoid is to make sure that the next national election in 2020, the presidential election, that our state operates on the same wavelength across all 67 counties.
A process.
Well, the legislature planning to talk about this matter even further before the regular session ends in May. Let's check in with Desmond Meade. He's with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, joining us live via Skype with the very latest on this. Desmond, good to see you as always. Check me if I'm wrong here. I do not recall fines and court costs in that bill that Florida voters passed 2-1 back last November.
You are correct, and and it's a sad day when politicians engage in partisan politics and totally disregard the will of Florida voters and try to frustrate the process. One of the things that we definitely want to highlight is that when you hear politicians talk about using terms such as ambiguous and confusing, they totally overlook the fact that this language had to go before the Florida Supreme Court. And every justice on the Supreme Court ruled that the language was very clear and concise and not confusing to the voters. And so it would seem like Florida politicians may have a problem with the courts and the people.
And wouldn't, if they had wanted fines to be paid, wouldn't they have put it into the wording to begin with? And again, check me if I'm wrong, fines and fees are not assessed by the judge. The sentence is handed down by the judge, which they have to fulfill. The fees are handed by the clerk of court.
And that's part of what's inherently wrong with this legislation that's being introduced, because it allows other entities other than the courts to determine whether or not an American citizen would be eligible to vote. And I think that there's something inherently wrong with that. When this went before the Florida voters, it was very clear that if a person makes a mistake and the judge sentences them, once they complete the sentence from the judge, from the court, that they have the right to vote. Now you have partisan politics trying to muddy up these waters.
Are you suggesting that if, say, Bob Fryer's got an outstanding parking ticket someplace, I could show up to vote in the 2020 election? They go, we're going to need you to clear that up before we let you cast your ballot.
You know what? That's what happened with partisan politics. It inserts itself into the will of the people. Every time. Go ahead.
And
we'll see.
Go ahead with your thought. I want to ask you one last thing, though.
No, so what I'm saying is that every time that you see politicians operate along the lines of partisan politics, the only people that suffer are regular, everyday people like me and you.
I guess.
And that's a sad day. You would think that the politicians would heed to the will of its voters, but apparently, you have some that just don't get it.
Desmond, let me ask you one last thing, because we talk about this going on until the end of May. They're going to talk about it, but it could go on well beyond that, right? There could be lawsuits involved here. This thing could drag on, and I think it affects maybe some 80% of the people that are trying to get their voting rights back. Are you worried this is going to go all the way and maybe even affect the 2020 election?
Well, listen, what I know is that my organization and other organizations stand at the ready to defend the will of all Florida voters. What's lost in this is that, especially when you get into partisan politics, people think that maybe the lives of people who are Democrats are affected. No, the lives of all Americans are affected. A lot of our members are people who wish they could have voted for Donald Trump. A lot of our members are constituents in the districts of these politicians that is infringing on the will of the voters. And we're going to make sure that they realize that. We're going to make sure that they understand it. And at the end of the day, we're going to make sure that they're held accountable for their actions in Tallahassee.
Well, Desmond, it's an ongoing fight. We know you'll be on the front lines the whole way through it, and we'll check back in with you and see how you guys are doing, okay? Good to talk to you.
Have a great day. You too.